To be honest, even though it's not the first time that this happens, and of course we have seen backlash with the NBA, even Mercedes-Benz had to apologize after quoting the Dalai Lama. It is quite surprising and very interesting how this integrates very closely with the most recent government strategy of really virulently sort of counterattacking researchers such myself, academics and Western governments over Xinjiang forced labor, and how this is so closely coordinated with now this domestic backlash against these companies, even in the case of H&M over statements on forced labor that were issued about 1 year ago.
How hard will it hit these brands, not only financially, but also how they're perceived in one of their biggest markets?
Well, for these brands, I think the impact for their China market is going to be very, very strong, potentially devastating. It now depends. Some of these companies have actually deleted their statements. China might give them a second chance, of course. The whole point is to scare not just them, but to scare the whole industry. It's really about providing a powerful counter-narrative and counter-push to say it's either us or your constituents back home who are calling for human rights. You'll have to choose. It's a very stark choice to make.
How do you think these companies should respond?
Well, how should they respond? They should respond by doing the right thing. What is right? Is forced labor acceptable? Is the police state and the brutal internment campaign and the sterilization of women in Xinjiang acceptable? I think brands have to make a moral choice here. But I think the choice in some way can't just be up to brands. It's really up to Western and other governments to really have the right legislation to just say, look, it's not just up to the companies. We're saying forced labor is illegal. And I think that's really where the decisions should be made in parliaments.
Otherwise, it's only going to get more difficult for foreign companies to trade in China, right?
Foreign companies with the current Chinese government and strategy are going to be forced to basically make a choice. But we also have to take into account this only works to an extent, right? It's the tall puppy syndrome. You can try to attack the tall puppy or whoever happens to stand out. But China is not going to cut off every single Western fashion brand. So it's a scare tactic also. If Western fashion brands or major international fashion brands unite and kind of do this together, it's going to get harder for China to just try to throw them all out because their domestic consumers are not going to accept it either.
Now, Adrian, you were named earlier this week in a round of Chinese sanctions, as you mentioned before. Can you tell us more about why you've been targeted?
I have actually been targeted for quite a while. It really started after some of these really high-profile leaked documents like the China cables or the Karakash list, internal Chinese government documents that were just very incriminating, really revealing the brutality and the truth about what was going on in China. And especially after the birth prevention and sterilization research, the attacks on me became very intensified. So I was now sanctioned together with a number of other European entities and another European scholar. But really, China has targeted me for my research for over a year now.
Tell us a bit more about how this might be affecting you, not only professionally, but personally as well.
Well, personally, it's been fairly intense to, of course, know that the largest country in the world sort of has a grudge against you and is not happy with you. But to be honest, it's not affecting my work. I've gotten used to it. In some way, I'm motivated by it. I mean, if the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs says that my work on forced labor in cotton harvesting is actually starting to have an economic impact on Xinjiang companies, and then threatening to do a civil lawsuit against me, that's actually a motivation because forced labor is wrong, and we want a business with Xinjiang cotton to stop because it's just not the right thing. Also, my work with the Chinese government documents, so the fact that I cannot travel to China is not affecting my research.
Just finally, you're also an advisor to the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance Committee on China. What can you tell us about the genocide bill currently going through the UK Parliament?
So the genocide bill in the UK Parliament, they've adopted a compromise solution. The original attempt was reintroduced into the Parliament several times on several iterations. The point was to try to get a court judgment in the United Kingdom on genocide, because such a judgment, typically governments say that's not up to a national government. Really, it has to be the United Nations, but China has been co-opting and controlling the United Nations, so that's not going to happen at this level. So the point was to force a genocide ruling in a United Kingdom court to actually get a verdict, to raise the profile of this issue. And the British government was able to interfere with that and come up with a compromise solution, which is below that. So it's in some ways disappointing. We see a lot of parliaments really caring about this atrocity, but a lot of governments are very hesitant to really take some stronger action on this horrendous atrocity.
Adrian Zenz, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate talking to you.
My pleasure.